On this episode, we talk about wheat planting and how to raise high-yielding wheat, as well as plot statistics and how to interpret soybean data. Know the odds of winning in one plot, one location. Soybean, corn, and wheat commodity prices are really good. Make sure you know what 10, 6, and 4 mean. As always, stick around for the corny joke.
Hi, this is Joe Mershman. Welcome to Cup of Joe, episode number 11, season 3. Today we have our regulars. We have Ben and Turk, and Tommy is remoting in, so so he has a little bit of a tough internet connection, so we're going to hear his voice but not see his movement. So let's start off with Ben. Again, we're right in the middle of harvest, a lot of things going on, wheat planting. Tell us what you got.
Yes, so we're going to talk a little bit about wheat planting today and some of the major components and some of the things to think about when we're sticking our wheat in the ground. One of the important things when we're sticking it in the ground is make sure the planting depth is correct, because with wheat like corn, we want to make sure we have nice, even planting depth. So we typically shoot for that 1.5 inches, maybe 1.75 inches if you're chasing moisture. So we don't want to get that wheat put too shallow, because that can affect overwintering issues, because you want that crown, your growing point, you want that plenty deep in the ground so it's not affected by freeze thaws and things like that. So 1.5 inches, 1.75 inches if you're chasing moisture. The other thing we want to think about is fertility. You know, a lot of the wheat yield is determined in the fall, so we want to make sure that all the P and K and adequate nitrogen is present for good high yielding wheat in the fall. So a lot of guys don't soil sample their wheat like they ought to, because they just kind of assume you got enough P and K out there. They try to put removal rates out, but you want to definitely take into account, if you're raising high yielding wheat, to have the appropriate amount of potash and phosphate down in the fall, not necessarily in the spring. You want to have everything ready for that plant so it can tiller properly, because a lot of that is determined in the fall.
How about sulfur? Sulfur important?
Sulfur is important on wheat. Just like on corn, every shot of nitrogen that you give with your wheat, I always encourage, a 7-to-1 or a 10-to-1 ratio with your sulfur to nitrogen, to make sure that wheat isn't shorting itself with sulfur. So I typically shoot for 25 to 30 pounds of nitrogen in the spring or in the fall, and then approximately 60 to 90 pounds depending on what your yield goal is, then again in the spring, and then maybe another shot of like foliar while you're putting on with your fungicide. So really important right now to get all that stuff squared away, because your yield is being determined right now. Our seed production wheat is in the perfect stages to make sure it's got the P and K down. We're talking wheat that's probably 1.5 inches tall. It looks really nice. It's really even. We've had really good wheat planting conditions. And, Turkey, you're going to talk about prices later, but we've had a really, really nice wheat selling year. So we want everybody to be successful with what they're growing, because you can actually sell wheat and make some money this year, especially at high yielding wheat.
What population should you plant wheat at?
We typically encourage 1.5 million. This year, depending on seed size, that could be 120 pounds per acre. That could be 155 pounds per acre. So you really have to pay attention to the wheat size to make sure that you're getting the appropriate population down, because what you have always talked about is, about one head per square foot is 1 bushel. So if you're shooting for that 70, 80, 90 bushel yields, you want to make sure that you have plenty of tillering and plenty of heads out there when it comes time to harvest. So in lighter soil types and later planting, we typically push the population up. Heavier soil types with higher fertility and earlier planting, you can get away with not quite planting that 1.5 million.
Yeah, it's all about tillering, isn't it? The earlier you plant, the more tillering you get. The later you plant, the less tillering, so you got to compensate by putting higher population.
Correct.
It's 5 pounds per week after the fly-free date is 5 increase roughly. I mean, that's just a rule of thumb type thing.
Give or take, yeah.
Well, that's good. Wheat is a lot like corn. Yield potential is determined in the fall, so that's good advice.
Yep.
Anything else, Ben?
Plan on fungicide. When you're budgeting your wheat, make sure that you're planning on putting a fungicide on. We talk about it. We'll talk about that when it comes closer to the time of application. But budget your wheat for having a fungicide. Just be ready to apply fungicide when that wheat starts to head out.
A foliar fungicide to protect the leaves and the head. But also, seed treatment is a must on wheat too, because a lot of your diseases are seed-borne in wheat. So a fungicide seed treatment, and then of course the insecticide also prevents the Hessian fly and also from aphids and mites transmitting barley yellow dwarf mosaic virus. So if you're not planting wheat without a good, solid, high-rate fungicide package, you could be opening yourself up to some of those problems.
Right, and there's typically two different rates for that too, and we always go with the southern rate, which is the higher imidacloprid rate for your insecticide, so that gives us the biggest window of protection.
See, it's warmer down south, so the aphids and mites live longer, so therefore you need a higher rate.
Correct.
Well, that's real good information. Tommy, you've been on the road this week, covering a lot of territory, but you kind of want to talk about some of the yield results. I know right now a lot of test plots are coming out and people are saying, hey, I won. So let's talk about data in general.
Yeah, Joe, out in the countryside, it still seems to be that there's a lot of questioning about the Enlist yields as far as is Extend Flex yielding, is Enlist yielding, what's the LLGT 27s doing? And with every company, there's some biased opinions out there, and rightfully so. But what was really interesting was the data that we got out of Winterset today, or this week with the first trials. And Joe, the way the first trials work, there's 84 entries, and when they post that data, they only put in the top 30 because that's the winning class. The rest of them are kind of discarded to the side. If they're not in the top group, they don't get discussed. So out of that Winterset data alone, 27 of the top 30 lines were E3, and the other, or the LLGT 27. 3 of the 30 were Extend. Of the 84 total entries in the test, 31 were Extend, so only of the 3 of the top numbers made the top yielding group. So I think what's important to take away from this is that the E3 is yielding at the top of the list of all these plots, so to speak. Especially when the first trials come out, a lot of guys like to look at that just to check out the new technology and see what it's doing. So with E3 doing as well as it is, I think we know what's really going out in the marketplace and then out in the field of E3 is really carrying a big punch with itself. And not to mention the LLGT 27s are right behind it. So I think to kind of clear the air as far as, and first trials are on a farmer first basis. They have, like I said, 84 entries. They post the top 30. 27 of those top 30s were E3. So I think that's a great takeaway to take from that data right there. And there's going to be more and more to come as that goes.
Yeah, definitely a good trend of what's going on there. And I just want to absolutely second your motion there on E3 and LLGT 27 as far as yield. But I think the one thing that you also need to look at when you look at data and you start seeing the LLGT 27s like dominating a test plot, that could be some carryover issues with Group 27 corn herbicides. We've seen that really comes into play in certain situations. So always look behind the curtain a little bit when you look at data. So that brings me to actually dusting off the old playbook from Monsanto back in 2010, and we're going to post that video and also a slide that talks about probability. In other words, when we were Monsanto licensees, this is one of the things they taught us. When you set up a test plot, if you want to win test plots, this is how you do it: one location, one place. And that is, you stack the deck by putting as many of your products against the least number of the other company's products. And even when you look at the chart that I have attached to this presentation today, is you can have a 2-bushel advantage, and if your one variety has a 2-bushel advantage over 3 of the competitors, only 37% of the time will you win. And that's in one location, one situation. If you have a variety that has a 4-bushel advantage, one variety against 3 competitors, you have a 4-bushel advantage, only 51% of the time will you show that 4-bushel advantage. So you have to look at data uniquely. In other words, if you look at one location, one place, you are probably going to get a distorted view of performance. You have to look at trends across the region, and you look at multiple locations, multiple averages, and also, if you can, multiple years. that's when you get a true picture of data. And that's why, like MS Tech, for example, and Ben can attest to that, we look at locations east to west, we look at them across the east to west splits, we look at multiple locations and also multiple years. So we've always called test plots, not really test plots, we've always called them show plots, because really what we're really looking at is the characteristics of the soybeans. We're really not intending them to be, this is what we make our yield decision on. So be very careful. I know Bayer Monsanto is right now, trying to claim the yield hill for Extend Flex, and I question that right now. I don't think we have enough data out there to say that they have a huge advantage over E3, but I do believe that we can talk about E3 and LibertyLink GT27 in a positive way, because we have proven products, multiple years, and a lot of locations of data. And we have not met virtually any farmer that's been dissatisfied with the performance this year with our products. And keep in mind, follow Ben's advice when it comes to picking soybean varieties. Look at your most limiting factor and choose your variety for that, because traits do not add any yield value. They only help you in the area of weed control and things like that. But you really need to look at your white mold, sudden death, phytophthora scores, cyst nematode, things like that, right, Ben? I mean, those things will take away more yield than just picking the top winner in a test plot.
Correct.
So that's where Ben and our area sales managers can sit down and say, if they just show you one plot where you won and say this is what you need to plant your farm to, that would be one of the biggest mistakes. I always tell farmer, if you really want to just look at one plot, pick the one at the bottom, because that's more than likely going to be the one at the top next year, because of the conditions are going to be next year are going to be different. Now, I'm exaggerating when I say that. I'm not literally asking you to do that, but it's an exaggeration. But we have many times seen that, where the variety that didn't do well this year is the best one next year. So you got to plant that portfolio, right? Right.
This is why we also are asking farmers to send in their yield monitor pictures, because those are real deal yields at the farmer's level, and farmers will believe that more so than they will company data.
That's right. And farmers, it used to be the seed companies controlled the data. Now the farmers control the data because they have yield monitors. So we're not going to fool you by showing you a test plot where we won. The farmer knows what's going on. So I don't know why seed companies just hand that one test plot out and say, hey, we're number one. But you can get good information from test plots. You can get trends, like Tommy when he's talking about that winter set location. That's a trend plot. In other words, we're looking at traits. We're not saying that we're proving that the Extend trait, the Enlist E3 trait is competitive with the Extend trait, very much so. Anyhow, anything else to add, Tommy, on your part as far as yields and what's going on out in the field?
No, Joe, unless you want me to give a little bit of a harvest update. Looks like Iowa is definitely ahead of where it was last year. Corn is at 42% compared to 6% last year. And then Iowa soybean harvest is at 80% compared to 10% last year. So things are definitely ahead of schedule. It looks like, as far as Illinois, definitely is ahead of the soybean trend, but behind on corn harvest. So things are definitely going in quickly, are coming out quickly. And looks like the weather forecast is going to cooperate here for the next couple of weeks as well. So full steam ahead.
Yeah. You've been running in some pretty good corn yields out there around too, haven't you, Tommy?
Yeah, we actually had a fellow from Adair County send us in a picture to Joe that his Stein 9734 was doing just over 300. And the field averaged around 240 as far as that goes. A lot of guys that were above the drought line in southwest Iowa, really happy with 9714, 9709, 9734 as far as yields coming out there. So definitely when you put the economics behind Stein corn and the yields that they're getting, they're very happy farmers out there.
That's good news, Tommy. Appreciate you sharing that. Well, Turk, I think you've got probably the best part of today's show. Tell us about it.
I asked you before we started taping, Joe. I said, "What does 10-4-6 mean?"
10-4-6. I said that's 20.
Yeah. Well, it's actually what the first part of every single one of our commodities that are important to our farmers are. We have $10 soybeans across the board on all of our lead months for this contract year. We got a 4 in front of all of the futures contracts on corn, and we've got a 6 in front of the wheat numbers. So,
and I've got a comment. There's an old saying that wheat always tops corn. So in other words, wheat will always have a little higher price than corn as a general, and it's because of the protein value.
Yep, it's a higher protein product. These are unprecedented for harvest conditions. We just don't get these opportunities. They're rare. Take advantage of them. Don't overlook at them. Market at these profitable levels. Do some marketing of this year's crop and be looking for opportunities next year's crop. We're entering into a time of year where things are going to become very, very volatile. We can have huge market swings. Keep an eye on it because you can get an opportunity to lock in some profits even at higher levels than these coming forward here, I do believe. But don't overlook the opportunity. And then we've got some great weather coming up here too. To finish up this harvest. So things are going to happen really fast. Basis has been historically narrow, widened out a little bit this week. As farmers started taking our advice and moving stuff to the market, basis did widen out a little bit, but don't overlook the opportunity to sell some crop.
Yeah, and Turk, that brings us, when we have a fast harvest like this and a good fall, well, what happens? Farmers start doing their tillage, they start putting their fertilizer on. That's the first step to a big yield next year, isn't it?
Yes.
So then the trade will say, hey, we got this crop out in record time. Farmers got the ground in shape, they got their fertilizer on. Hey, we're going to have a big crop next year because, they're going to break up a lot of these compaction zones this fall with their tillage. I mean, I've been talking to farmers too, and they're anxious to get out in the field and break up those compaction zones that were created last year with last year's wet conditions. So
nobody got a lot of tillage done last fall, so it's very, very timely for everything.
Well, that's good advice. I hope our farmers take it. But I do know there'll be some farmers that won't sell. They will not sell at these high prices because they don't want to pay income tax, right?
It's a good problem to have.
Good problem to have. We hope that's your biggest problem in life. Anything else to contribute from Tommy or Turk or Ben? Well, as always, we'll finish up with our corny joke. And this one here is, how do you repair a jack-o'-lantern? How do you repair a jack-o'-lantern? You use a pumpkin patch.
Yeah.
All right, I hope that'll get you to next week. And as always, thank you for your support. Thank you for your business. Hope you and your family are healthy. We'll see you next week. Take care.